Student, student, our university's ready. Hi, I'm Maureen Hall, the webinar moderator and a partner at Tarragona Associates. I have over 35 years of work experience in higher ed at public and private institutions, with 20 of those years managing business school, graduate programs, and student affairs. Today's webinar is brought to you by Tarragona Associates. We provide higher ed consulting focused on professional, continuing, and online learning. TA connects experts in these fields with higher ed institutions seeking advice, assessment, and resources to design, build, and maintain high quality credit and non-credit programs that meet the needs of students in a global economy increasingly reliant on lifelong learning. We live in a new normal. I believe we can all agree on that point. Just 7 months ago, if you were having a conversation with a friend and that person said the following: in a few months, the country will be changed and we will be social distancing, wearing masks. Most people will be required to work remotely, and educational institutions will be teaching most of their courses online. Most likely you would have laughed at that person. But here we are. Higher education has been and continues to be impacted by COVID-19. The spring 2020 courses were disrupted and they had to go online, had to go remote. And then fall has moved to a hybrid format. And in some cases, universities are teaching all of their courses online. And our students have experienced social unrest that we haven't seen since the 1960s. There are a lot of challenges for students, faculty, and staff. We are here to discuss some of these challenges and some ways higher ed can adjust to prepare for a changed student. We have a distinguished panel today. Our panelists are Clyde Dowdy, the Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics and Recreation at Bowie State University. Clyde began his tenure as a Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at Bowie State in January of 2015. Prior to that, he had spent 38 years at New York Institute of Technology. He started out there as a Division II student athlete, and after graduating, joined the athletic department as an administrator. He earned 3 degrees at New York Institute of Technology, his bachelor's degree in business administration, or business management, I should say, and has 2 master's degrees, one in human resource management and one in human relations. He's currently pursuing his doctorate degree in educational leadership at Bowie State. We have Andrea Morris. She is the director of the Washington semester and an adjunct professor at Virginia Tech. Andrea has a 25-year history working to create systems for sound policymaking in and on behalf of communities and organizations. She believes that exposing students to real-world issues that demonstrate the connectedness of sectors will equip and prepare them as leaders of organizations that will establish policies, plans, and programs that will be engaging and responsive. She has a PhD in public policy from George Mason University, an MA in urban studies from Long Island University, and a BS in public affairs from Indiana University. And our third panelist, Jessica Waters. She is the Dean of Undergraduate Education and Vice Provost for Academic Student Services at American University. Jessica has been a faculty member in the School of Public Affairs since 2008. and she previously served as the Associate Dean of the School of Public Affairs and also an adjunct faculty member for the Washington College of Law at American University. Before joining the faculty of American University, she practiced law. She has a JD and a BA from American University. As you have seen from their credentials, they have a lot to share in this webinar today. We would also like all of you to participate in this webinar. So we will have a series of questions that we will put before you. And we really would love it if you would respond. And you can put your responses in the chat section. We also want to hear your questions and your comments, and those can go in the chat section as well. Andrea will lead the conversation with the panelists. Please welcome Dr. Morris.
Thank you, Maureen, so very much for that wow introduction. I'm humbled by it all. I'm sure our panelists will say the same. And again, welcome to Jessica and to Clyde. What an incredible opportunity we have to engage in a very important and very timely conversation as we all prepare to engage students in the next week. As Maureen said, the last 7 months have been absolutely amazing, dynamic, unexpected to say the least. We have been thrust into new territory that really is unprecedented in our history, in our academic history, by way of moving classes online expeditiously. Within a week's time after our midterm breaks, our spring break, that's that word, spring break, coming back and having classes be remote. Students unsure, do I return home from our spring break? Do I go directly to the school? What are the directions that I am to have? And so we found ourselves in a space that, again, not accustomed to. Moving online, are our systems ready? Our computer, do I have the computer, is it updated? All those kinds of questions affected not only our faculty and our staff, our students, of course, and our universities. And do we have the bandwidth? Can we reach to where students are? So many questions, and yet we found ourselves in a space that we had to get it done. And we're here today to discuss the impacts of that. The mental and emotional, and of course the physical impacts. We know, and we've been discussing a lot about those impacts on our students. We're interested, and I'm interested, and Tarragona is interested in the effects on our faculty and our staff, because we are the gatekeepers, if you will, to the knowledge of our students. And if we are not healthy, if we have not taken the time to invest to understand the impacts on ourselves, then are we ready as an institution to receive our students? And with that, I want to go to the first question, being, what are you concerned about? What are your greatest concerns, Jessica and Clyde, as we enter this fall semester? As Jessica in particular, American just over a week ago decided we're going to move to online when previously it was going to be hybrid. What are the greatest concerns that you have as Dean of Undergraduate Education for the fall, and why?
Can I make a list?
Yeah, yes.
First, thank you so much for having me and
Absolutely.
For the conversation. And I really appreciate the focus on how do we keep our faculty and our staff well so that we can be there for our students, because it's so critical. And there is always that the visual of you're on the airplane and the mask comes down, right? And you have to put yours on first before you can take care of others, right? So that visual really resonates with me. It has been, I've been part of AU for, in some senses, either a student or a faculty member or an administrator for almost 25 years now. And, been in an administrative role at AU for, 8-9 years now. And it has been the most wild time I have ever experienced at AU. I was a litigator prior to my AU experience, and that had its share of drama, and that pales in comparison to what higher ed has gone through over the past 6-7 months. I think for all of us, and I feel very comfortable saying this about our colleagues across the country, it's been health and safety, right? I mean, that has been first and foremost. Every decision we made since March, I vividly remember it was Super Bowl Sunday, because I remember I was watching the game and suddenly I was not watching the game anymore because we needed to get our students who were studying abroad home, right? And that's when it all really began and hasn't stopped since that point. And at every step, the question was, how do we keep our students and our community safe, right? And how do we do that responsibly? How do we do that in a way that is informed by the science? What science can we rely on, right?
Mhm.
And making all of those decisions, and at the same time, needing to be responsible about our fiduciary duties to the institution, right? And to our staff and our faculty, and balancing the real, health and safety at the topmost concern, the educational experience, continuing to provide that in the way that our students and community are accustomed to, and then also the real economic impact on institutions of
Right.
higher ed and what that means for jobs, right? What that means for job security. Because when we think about our faculty and staff, they need to feel secure. They need to know, right, that we have their backs and we're all working through this together. So it's the balance of those three. I think the things that worry me the most for the fall semester is the sense of isolation that I'm concerned about for our students and our staff and faculty. It's just a different way of engaging than I think any of us ever have. And I worry about that. I worry about the isolation issues. I worry about increased rates of anxiety and depression among our student population, but I also worry about that for our faculty and staff. Many of us are juggling tons of competing responsibilities. I, for example, have two small kids at home who will be, completely online in the fall with their own schooling, and then, my spouse and I both have full-time jobs. Like, how do we make that work and have any degree of sanity and any degree of fun, right? Everyone in higher ed is dealing with those exact same questions, whether it's kids or caring for a parent or simply maintaining your friendships in your community. And then I think doing with that with the layer, as Maureen noted, of, at least double pandemics, right? When we think about, the COVID pandemic, and then we think about the racial injustice pandemic, and then we're thinking about a looming economic pandemic, right? And, so I would argue a triple. All of those pieces colliding for everyone we work with who are humans. And I think that's the most important piece of the work that we can do to support our staff and faculty right now is approach everything from a human lens. Like, how does this impact the humans that we know and care about? So making sure that our policies and decisions are always shaped by that. So I think that's what I'm most concerned about, is like taking care of the humans who are experiencing all of these incredibly challenging things.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. I like to use the words "I see you." Really, to ensure and to demonstrate to each person that I am responsible for, that I see you and your circumstances are different from your colleagues or students or whatever it may be. Clyde, what concerns you most about this fall semester and why? You are on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think Jessica kind of really captured and put it all together. As universities, we are facing the same types of challenges. And she talked about the humanistic aspect since March, when we all had to change. And I don't like to say the new now. I don't like to say a new normal. This is our now right now, and we have to deal with the now. And the now means that we have to address what is happening in the now, in the moment, because the moment never ends and it's continuing to evolve every day. With science, data, and we based upon our values, that's how we're going to address the issues that everyone is dealing with from a health perspective, and that's mental and physical, well-being. How do we address these issues to get through this period of COVID and get back to a new now or a different now that we're experiencing right now? What concerns me the most is the stability of education. How are we going to do this, and what is the new model of education going to look like? It has brought about a lot of people out of the woodwork to challenge what we have been doing for a long time. The old way of teaching has been threatened from a number of people looking at the brick and mortar approach to education and how faculty have to adjust to the current technology out there, because our students were born with computers and games and in their hands, and we weren't that type of environment that we grew up in. So it's been an adjustment for a lot of our professors. But I still know this, the human being is a resilient individual, and we will find a way to overcome and achieve success during this really unprecedented time.
I appreciate that. The now, absolutely, it is now. And you know, in resilience terms, the conversation is usually we want to be restored to our previous normal or the normal. And I always challenge that in that the very thing is our normal is what we're existing in right now. Absolutely, absolutely. And what does that look like, and what parameters do we need to push beyond while we are learning how to navigate within these confines that we find ourselves in right now. And part of the conversation has been, we have COVID proofed, or we have been COVID proofing our campuses, if you will, putting in policies and statements regarding face masks and hand washing and separation in our classrooms. As a matter of fact, I've seen pictures where personnel have been in classrooms literally using a measuring tape to separate the desks. So we are doing those physical things. And the next question is regarding our mental and health proofing, if you will, for our faculty, our staff. So I'm interested in, have there been meetings and conversations deliberately done to address and to support and to meet with faculty and staff? Have you been involved in any? Have you led any? Do you know other campuses that are doing that work, Clyde?
Well, I'm part of the cabinet and work alongside of all my vice presidents. And since March, when we had to shelter in, we understood the impact that this would have on a lot of our students, especially our African-American students who are used to being engaged on campus, and at times are in places that just aren't appropriate. I guess not inappropriate, that's like a bad word, but just not someplace they want to be at the time. They'd rather be around their peers. They'd rather be engaged in on-campus activities. And when that was kind of just snatched away from them, we understood that. And the same with the faculty. The faculty on Bowie State University are extremely engaged with their students, and there's a high level of camaraderie there. So from day one, Dr. Bro, who is the president of Bowie State University, along with the vice presidents, have been very intentional about town halls and working with our faculty, staff, every component of the campus, every component of our shared governance, to ensure that they have what they need, or we try to provide as much as possible within our resources, the resources that they need to deal with the current now. And it has been rewarding, because people have rallied around each other. Like I said, we are very resilient, and they're understanding after a while, when people kind of got the concept that this was real and not a hoax and not being perpetrated against somebody personally, that they feel that we have to stick together and we have to do what we need to do on campus, away from campus, to combat the effects of COVID. And that's what has happened. And on the mental health issue, prior to COVID in athletics, mental health had been a huge issue on the NCAA level. So this just now accelerated, exasperated it, and keeping it growing. We in athletics have really been intentional about working with our student athletes from a coaching perspective and student to student perspective. I've hired a individual who's all he's going to do is work with mental health and well-being because we are very concerned that the impact of being away from an activity, athletes are used to being engaged on a higher level than a lot of other students, and that has taken its toll on some of them. But with support and help and communication, the virtual world we live in, it has reduced some of that angst that they are experiencing. But we are really intentional about working with every shared governance component on this campus to provide the support that they need to get through COVID-19.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, you shared some of that information and from the top, from the president's office herself, it's a wonderful demonstration of I see you. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Jessica, from your position as Dean of Undergraduate Education, again, your reach is far and wide. And so very interested to hear your efforts or your understanding of what you're seeing in not only at American, but maybe across the way with your colleagues as well.
I would echo a lot of what Clyde said in a similar fashion. Our president led a retreat of the President's Council that was focused on wellness, right? That was focused on the wellness of the President's Council, which includes all of the deans, and with very clear, a very clear expectation that we were doing the same for our teams, right? So a lot of my team, for example, is academic advisors. And another portion of my team is a team that is entirely focused on teaching our first year students. So the amount, the emotional labor that team is engaging in is extraordinary. And we need to make sure that we are putting things in place to give them space to, simply unplug at times, right? And know that there are times that is your time still, right? The division between work and life has gotten so blurred that I think that's one of the most critical things we can do is setting norms and expectations around, online working does not mean constant working. And how do we navigate that? So one of the things that we've tried to be very deliberate about at AU is, for example, our flex schedules and working with each individual team member to see, what is it that you as an individual need because of the other things happening in your life, right? And how can we make that work experience work for you? We have Wellness Mondays. We've extended some of our childcare and elder care benefits so that they're more available for our faculty and staff in the fall. We experimented with Zoom-free Wednesdays as well to give people some of those sort of defined mental breaks. We actually declared a full university-wide day off in the middle of June and just said, everyone go, go recharge, take some time. So there are those sort of concrete things you can point to. But I think the real work is happening when we as managers, how do we model it for our teams? And then what are the expectations we set? So like, for example, with my leadership team, every Friday I say to them, do not check your email. If something is actually on fire, I will text you and we will figure out a way to connect. But there is no expectation that you are online at night, right? Or on the weekends. Or I'm trying to get in the better habit of doing like delayed delivery on my emails. So that if I happen to be working at 10 o'clock at night, they're not getting emails from me at 10, they're getting them at 9 the next morning, right? So I think those little things actually amount to a lot. And that, to me, that's how we take care of people.
Absolutely. And I love your term emotional labor. That is a very accurate, powerful description of what we do as faculty, staff, and administration, and being able and given permission to put the separation in place, that there be a clear demarcation between home and the work is so critical. And so I'm grateful as a faculty member to hear you speak to that as, again, being as an administrator and a dean of such an important aspect of the work that campuses do. It will be interesting going forward to see if faculty and staff maintain and continue in those permissions that have been given, and whether administrators are reinforcing those. So that is something that we will keep our pulse on to see and to check in, because those are going to be very important going forward. And so as we consider again and think about the mental and emotional well-being of our faculty and staff related to this heaviness of pandemic, I personally have lost family members, and so that is ever present in mind and in heart and spirit. Then we layer on this heaviness and the other crises of our racial unrest. And both of these happening simultaneously, absolutely unthinkable. Each one individually is enough to push us and to cause all types of questions and anxieties and needs for emotional and mental support. But when you put them together, and then again, our students have never experienced any type of unrest like this in their lifetime. So this is very, very new to them. And for our faculty and our staff, some of us, this is not new. This is something that some of us live with constantly. And then those who are allies are right out front. Now, our students have been leading the marches in so many ways, and our faculty and our staff have been right there as well. And so as we prepare to come back to campus again, that's why we titled this Same Campus, quote unquote, because we know the physical space is the same, certainly. However, the culture has no choice but to change, because those who are on the campus are different than when we left in the spring. And so we know we're coming back to a different, culture on campus, and certainly a different student. Again, our question is, what about the faculty and staff? And so when we look at the social unrest that has been happening outside our gates, if you will, on the universities, what are we doing to help, again, our faculty and our staff to settle for themselves how this has affected them? Are we having conversations? Have we created safe spaces, once again, that they can come and lament or give thoughts, have conversations, do what they need to do? Because we are the ones, again, who will be standing in front of our students. This knowledge transfer is so important, and that is what we've been chosen and elected to do, and I'm very humbled to be able to do that. I've got to recognize what my own triggers are. I've got to spend time to learn myself in this new now and how it shows up for me. So again, the question is, are we doing that for our faculty and our staff? Have we given opportunities for that? And Clyde, I'll start with you this time on that question.
Well, it's a very profound question, and I have a lot of engagement with a lot of the faculty members on campus. And here at HBCU, these issues that are now plaguing the country are nothing new to HBCU students, nothing new to an HBCU university. So we have been dealing with them from this side of the highway for a long, long time on our yellow brick journey. I think with the civil unrest that you speak of with Mr. Floyd, the history is now not in the closet anymore. It's been, the doors have been blown off the closet. So now we are starting to go back and find out, if you don't address issues that have not been addressed for 400, 500 years, they continue to build up in that closet and they grow mold. And the mold will destroy your clothes. It will destroy your life when you try to go wear those clothes. And they're unfit to be worn. So that's what's happening now. Our clothes are unfit to be worn because we haven't addressed the mold in our closets. And our faculty have been very intentional about working with our students for a long, long time. And this period gives us more of a ability to teach. Life is a maze. It's joy and pain and sunshine and rain. You can't have one without the elements. Those are the elements of life. So you have to manage it. And my word for life, and I tell anybody that listens to me, you have to manage the situation, whatever it is. And as leaders, we have to be at our best when things are at their worst. And this is a time when we have to step up and show folks fighting is not the answer. Violence is not the answer. but education and the ability to teach and show folks how do we overcome within the systems. The system is already out there. The narrative is out there that folks can't do certain things, that they have been deprived of certain things. The discrimination, the microaggressions, the inequities that are out there now are coming to the forefront and saying that this is just not right. If this is a country that's built upon unity and is supposed to be the greatest country in the world, why can't we get these simple things right? And it's very simple to treat people with equality and equity. But for some reason, that doesn't seem to be the narrative that anybody wants to hear. So our counter narrative has to be, how do we change the narrative so it does include everybody who is a member of this society, so they will have that equality that we all need and want. And that's how I think our faculty are going about things, Andrea.
Appreciate that. I certainly can tell the passion behind that. And that's one of the things I'm speaking to and speaking about is there are real impacts to faculty and staff in our own internal processes and our thinking. Again, we all have triggers. I know I cried for days and days, and there's still moments that the tears come to my eyes, and it's for a number of reasons. One, because of the lack of honoring of the person. That is a human life. And for me, we are image bearers of God, and how dare we treat someone as if they are not? So that alone is an impact, and it's a major impact. And then the second being, how does my existence threaten yours? And I ask that, and I say that, and I also talk about that with my students, and asking the question of those who see me as someone less than. I talk about identity and value, and we all, every single person wants to be recognized and valued for simply for their life. And that it has been taken away in so many ways for Black and Brown people as well. And so as a human being and who has been, again, chosen and blessed and honored to teach and stand before students, I have to ensure that as I interact with them, as I stand before them, that I'm able to manage my own disturbances within me. I see this as a very real disturbance in our system, which is needed and it needs to continue. I've got to ensure that I'm ready and I'm capable of sharing with them my conviction without it coming across as, in so many, in ways that can be negative or favoring one thing or another. That is not what we are to do. But we also have to recognize that my experiences are just as important. So again, the question about doing this for our staff, making sure that our staff and our faculty have the space to come in to say, you know what, I am tired. I am so tired of dealing with this, whatever it happens to be, and honoring that, because we want to give that to our students as well, but we've got to do it. We have to be given permission to do the same thing. So Clyde, do you have something else to add to that, please?
Yeah, really quick, Andrea, based upon it. I grew up in New York City. So a lot of the things that we're seeing with Andrea, Breonna Taylor, to me, it's not new. But what is new is the technology that is exposing it, because people were always asking for proof. That's not true. That's not true. Now you can't argue with the video. You can't argue with what's going on out there. And back in the 60s, I grew up in the 60s. I saw the civil unrest. I thought it would never come back to what it was. I thought we were past it. We were going to be on our merry yellow brick journey, all kumbaya. It's not happening. We have now, like I said, we have not exposed the mole in the closet. So now here we are at this point and juncture in time trying to deal with these issues once again. So now you have the proof. How do we now manage that with all of the hues coming together? And what's different about the 60s, we were marching, it was just a certain hue that was out there. Now you can see the diversity that is coming about, because the technology has allowed them to say, that ain't right. And when it's not right, you got to step up and say something. If you see something wrong, say something. And people are saying something now.
Indeed, indeed. And Jessica, again, being familiar with American myself, and I know the activism that is present on campus, faculty as well as students and staff also. And so with this question, I'm very interested in what you see is happening or needs to happen possibly on campus.
An extraordinary amount needs to happen, I think is the short answer. I think that one thing, the confluence of the pandemics has exposed is power, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we think about who is making decisions and how we are making decisions about, for example, is the university reopening, and if the university reopens, what does that mean for who has to come to campus and who is most impacted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about, I obviously come, so I'm a white woman and I'm in a position of considerable positional power, right? And you add all those privileges together. And I think, a couple of things that I heard so clearly from some of my team members and our students over the past couple of months is we as other universities had a habit of putting out these statements that we were like shocked and surprised, right? We were shocked and surprised and we were saddened. And we started to hear so clearly, I have a vivid memory of a student sitting in my office and saying, why are you shocked and surprised? Stop telling me you are shocked and surprised and actually do, right? And then in meeting with my team, so my team, which is undergraduate education and academic student services, it's about 80 of us. We have actually been dividing into caucus groups. So we have a white caucus, we have a Black caucus, we have a non-Black person of color caucus, recognizing that those groups need different spaces right now, right? And our white caucus, frankly, has considerable amount of work to do. And incredibly important that we weren't doing that. Painful work that could cause so much pain to, for example, our Black colleagues, that we were doing it in a space that would cause less pain, right? And that is a new way of thinking about higher ed when we think about actually deliberately creating these spaces.
Yes.
And it's painful for everyone, right? But it's so necessary. And there's a piece one of my colleagues said, very clearly to me, and this is part of leadership, I think, is making ourselves vulnerable enough to be willing to acknowledge the places in which we have been complicit, or ways in which we have actually upheld power structures in ways that are damaging to our Black and brown colleagues, right? I've been called out pretty publicly at different points, and rightfully so, by staff and faculty who have said, Jessica, you're here and you're engaging in the work, but you are choosing to be in the work. I don't have a choice because this is my life experience as, for example, a Black man or a Black woman. And you, Jessica, can choose to go home and not think about this, right? And not live it every day. I don't have that choice, right? And I mean, to me, that was, it's just such a profound shift in the way, and it shouldn't be profound, right? But for me, it was one of those moments where I was like, and that's right. And it just, it changes the way that you do your work, and it changes the way we make decisions. And I think for me, one of the most powerful pieces has really been the question of power, like how we think about power, how we share power, how we hoard power, even if it's sort of what we think of as benign, right?
Yes.
What are we doing there when we're engaging in sort of benign protectionism or something else, right? So I think the two, and obviously the issues of race were not new in our country, but the acuteness of it in that moment, combined with the acuteness of COVID, I think has fundamentally raised questions about power structures in higher ed. And of course, those power structures are tied to privilege and race.
Ooh. Yes.
We're having a lot of conversations, yes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I am doing some of the very things as well, and with a group of women, and we are multiracial, Latina, Black, white, and I talk about this work as our heart work, and it is hard work. It is very hard heart work, and without it, though, we will not move forward. And so it is critical that the spaces be provided for that. So Jessica, thank you. Thank you for what American is doing, and Clyde, thank you for what Bowie State continues to do. One of the things that is so true and real for Black and Brown faculty and administrators is there has been a caution to our speaking up in certain instances. The statement that was made about, Jessica, you get to go home and not think about it. I don't get to rub this off. And I have said in other spaces, don't erase me. I cannot be erased. I take this home. It goes with me wherever I am. And so the courage, and I'm going to use that word deliberately, the courage to speak up in this moment is profound in and of itself. And to say to an administrator, okay, I'm going to be a mirror to you right now. And very candidly, I believe our world, what we see on the streets, is a mirror for America. And we can either acknowledge it, because a mirror cannot lie. It only reflects what it sees. And so it is mirroring to us who we are. And as those who are on institutions of higher ed and learning, what a privilege and honor and a huge responsibility we have to engage with our students, to teach them how to marshal these moments. But if we are not doing it, if we don't know how to do it, if we have not been given the spaces to explore and to examine and to put forward and speak honestly and speak in truth what the effects and impacts are, then we again are doing a disservice to our students. And we truly cannot call them to a greater place or a higher place, because we ourselves are not there. So in the last question, again, this idea of preparation, we've been COVID proofing, we've been putting these very important rules and space requirements in place. I think about us individually, and those who are joining us as our attendees. I really want you to consider this. Are you ready? And we've been talking collectively as faculty, staff, and administrators, but I want us to personalize this question now. And I ask myself, am I ready? My classes start on Monday. Am I ready? I will have freshmen, and I will also have upperclassmen, junior and seniors. Am I ready? Because they present very different life experiences, even at their tender ages. Those freshmen are very different from those juniors and seniors. And those freshmen are coming in with their family's values in a lot of ways. And now it's time for them to examine and search, are those mine or do I have different ones? They may have been leading some of these marches. They are out helping and supporting and getting food for those who may be in homes and not able to get out. Am I ready to interact with those students who are very different than they were in the spring? And so for each one of us, consider that question. And Jessica and Clyde, I would love to hear your response to that. Clyde, go ahead.
Jessica, you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Being ready. I mean, that's something as an athlete that we are very conscious of, and preparation is the key to being ready to engage. And here at Bowie State University, led by Dr. Breaux, she put together a task force very, very early, and working within the USM system, which we're a part of, looking at what it looks like for us to be ready, and then work with our constituent base out there to determine their readiness to engage with our faculty, staff being back on campus. Our task force, led by Dr. Demetrius Johnson, Anthony Savia, our CFO, Dr. Johnson is our new Vice President for Student Affairs, Wade Henley and Demita Smith have put together a program looking at every aspect of our campus environment, from the entrance points to get on campus, testing, PPEs, Dr. Wutar, who is our director of our wellness center, collaborating. I mean, it's a team. You talk about a family, a team. This is a team effort. And together, everyone achieves more in this team effort. And that's what's happening under the circumstances of COVID. How we use the restroom, things that we took for granted, life taken for granted prior to COVID. We could go to the movies, we can go to a restaurant, we could come on campus, we can go into the rec center. Now we have to change our whole focus and our paradigm. How many people do we let in at a time? How do we keep people apart? How do we now take folks outside and do more outside activities right now until we get through this? All the buildings have been retrofitted with new air filter systems so it can clean the air better. Things that we never thought of prior to COVID, we are now engaged in because we have to be engaged in. We have to use the technologies. We have to find the resources. The CARES money that came from the government has been used to help. In the first semester, it was helping people get through this because there was a lot of financial hardships on folks and how we deal with that. And if they can't financially support themselves, there is no tomorrow for them in their mindset. So we had to help them get through that, especially the student base. So we come out of that. Where's the CARES money now going to? Well, it's going to help you sustain yourself in school. It's going to help us put in the proper procedures to safeguard you because everybody wants to be safe. If you look at Maslow's triangle, which I love, at the bottom of the base is the biggest thing. It's about self-preservation. How do we address those needs so you can go up if you don't address the bottom, you can't get to the top. So we have used that, I think, very effectively to impact and affect people's readiness, as you have put it, to be engaged as a professor with your students on different levels who have different needs. Freshmen have different needs than sophomores and juniors, and the seniors, they're like, deuces, I'm out of here, you know? So they are looking at things in life in a total different aspect. So we have to treat each of those pockets differently and unpack where they're at and then try to fold it back up and give them something that they're ready to travel with.
Thank you for that. Indeed, indeed. Jessica, do you have a thought about that? And I want to, there's a very interesting and I think very important question that came up from the chat, and I want us to address that. And I know we are at our time, but this is important that Tom Van Winkle has brought forward. So Jessica, please go ahead and discuss, and then we'll get to that question.
I'll be very brief so that we can get to that question. I think the thing that is most interesting is we've had to be prepared and ready as everything switches. It feels like every few weeks, right? So, you know, when you had to get prepared and ready to move all of our students off campus, then you had to be prepared and ready to get them through the spring semester. Then we had to be prepared and ready for the summer. Then we had to be prepared and ready to reopen campus. And now we're getting prepared and ready to welcome most of our students back virtually, right? So it's been a constant exercise in nimbleness and flexibility and attending to the whole student.
Right.
So, you know, sort of echoing a lot of what Clyde said, but I'll keep it brief so we can get to the question.
And given both of those statements, impacts, our charge as faculty and administrators and staff on campuses is to have an impact on our students, on whomever comes into our spaces, our offices and things like that. And that includes other staff of the faculty. Tom brings up a very interesting dilemma for us, in that we very well know that there are those who will not buy into the kumbaya, if you will, that they, in their positions, that they hold that some of us are less than, they are racist, they are bigots, they, as Tom says, they perceive us as having our heads in the clouds, if you will. How do we, what do we, when do we, you know, how do we put something together that engages them and pulls them in? Because we have to teach them as well. We have to work alongside them as well. What are the actions that we can do to demonstrate a commitment to those who still and remain anti, and you fill in the blank, whatever that happens to be. And Tom, that's a very important question. Go ahead, Clyde.
Well, I think is an extremely important question, and it's a tough question because whenever in my history, I've gone to a lot of diversity conferences, and the people who are there are the ones who believe in what's going on. It's the ones who don't believe in it. I ain't showing up because they're not buying into the scenario. They don't want to hear it. So here's an educational aspect. You know, you hear Tom's question, and it's all about engagement, making people feel comfortable. I looked at Suzanne Brinker's situation where she said, we got up June 19th at Northeastern University. June 19th is the day that folks, Black folks, really got their independence. It wasn't about July 4th. And I never really had any thoughts or feelings about July 4th because it really never affected me as a Black person. We were still caught up in enslavement. But June 19th is if schools and people at power, and Jessica talked about power, those power people now have to come down a notch and understand, get the mold off the closet, out the closet, and understand where these folks are living at and what they're dealing with. Whereas Jessica said, when someone told her, you go home, you don't think about it. I go home and I have to live it. I'm in this every day. And people thought it was made up. It's something that was on television, fabricated. It's not fabricated. So we as leaders, no matter where I'm in front of Black folks, I'm in front of white folks, I'm in front of Asian, I have to understand where they come from. I have to walk 20 miles in their shoes to understand where they're coming from. And then when I get to that 20th mile mark, I still got 20 more miles to go, because that's how deep these folks have been living through a lot of issues that we just don't understand. So we have to understand the other side and come to some kind of agreement with ourselves. You talk about the mirror. Yeah, the mirror reflects who you are, but if you're not looking at it correctly and you don't see the details, you're never going to see your true self. So you really have to look at that reflection and say, is that really what I am and who I am and what I need to do to be a better person in this world?
Thank you for that. Jessica, you have any thoughts about that? About Tom's question?
I mean, can I just say yes to everything I just said? But I'll share two quick thoughts. One, I think it's incumbent on white leaders now, such as myself, to take a different role than some of us may have taken in the past, right? And to determine in decision making with our Black and Brown colleagues when we need to be in front, when we need to be beside, and when we need to walk behind, right? And when are those times appropriate, and what do our Black and Brown colleagues need, right? And that I think that is so critical to figure out how we use our positional power and when we just need to get out of the way, right? So both of those things. And then I would add the other thing that we need to do is we have to, in many senses, make it non-negotiable. So at AU, for example, we've instituted a mandatory curriculum for all of our incoming students focused on race, privilege, and structures of power, privilege, and inequality. And we're very deliberately moving toward anti-racist pedagogy and creating a program that is actually anti-racist in practice, in curriculum, and in pedagogy. And it's a non-negotiable. Like, we are saying to our faculty, this is a required part of our curriculum. All of our students are going to take it. And we say to our students who come in, you're all going to take it. And if this is a place, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to do that work, then maybe AU isn't the right place for you, right? And so I think you make it a non-negotiable in a lot of ways.
I appreciate that. Just real quick, I thought, and we're almost about 5 till 3, for Tom, how I approach that is our stories. Yes, Tom, absolutely. I believe that our stories remove any titles, remove any degrees. My PhD is more about my story than anything else. When we begin to share our stories, we break down barriers in so many ways, because we demonstrate that, again, I am my personhood, the value that I bring, my identity. I go through those same questions as you do, person who may not believe that I belong, or I struggle with this, and I'm challenged by that. And I groom my students to understand and to learn their own stories, to own their own stories, and be confident in their own stories, because it is those stories that demonstrate our humanity, that we are navigating the same roads, and it is by our choices that we end up where we are. And my degree has nothing to do with that. My degree is, again, is a reflection of my choices, yes. And it's not any better, it's mine, and it's what I've chosen to do. So Tom, that's how I engage in that, because I have had students who have not been excited about me standing in front of them. And I have taught them and poured into them, not any differently than the others. And it's made a difference. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that. So great question, Tom. And I hope that we all consider that and think about that as we begin the fall, as we prepare to step into this new semester. Again, the same campus, but very different students, and thereby hopefully very different administrators and faculty and staff as we do our own heart work to get ready. And so as we close this out, I want to thank Jessica and thank Clyde very much for your candidness, for your hearts, for your presence, for what you're doing on your campuses, and as you hold hands, if you will, with your colleagues across our higher ed system, that we will truly make a change. And I'd like to let everyone know that on September the 3rd, we'll have a part 2 to this conversation, and we'll be talking about our students, really focused on our students. In our minds, it was important to get an understanding of what the administration and the faculty and staff are doing, because we, again, are the ones who are the holders and the keepers of the information and that knowledge transfer. And once we are in a space that we are ready, then we can focus really on what our students need and how we can respond to their needs. So humbled to be with you today. Thank you, all of the attendees. We appreciate your presence, and please join us and stay tuned for more information as we get ready for the September 3rd. And I'll turn it back to Maureen now.
Okay. Thank you to all of the panelists. This was a wonderful discussion and very insightful. We thank the audience for attending as well. The next time you're confronted with some problems or some needs at your institution, please don't hesitate to reach out to Tarragona Associates. We are really, we're professionals who have a lot of experience in higher education issues, and we would love to help you out. And the first session is free, so just reach out to us and we can discuss what your needs are. I hope you have a wonderful week, and thanks again for attending.